kind of explore some stuff that it won't be entirely new to a few of you, but it's one of those things that when you find out that this is a thing that is in play in relationships, it helps make it entirely different and entirely better. And this won't be new to some of you. When I was in school, I was in a class down at BYU. It was a family relations kind of class. And I don't remember very much at all about the class, but this professor was telling us about, and this was in the 90s? Yeah, it was about 1990. And she was telling us about, and we were talking specifically about couples, about marriage. And she diagrammed it like this. She said, this is the trend in our culture today, in our society, in America. It kind of looks like this, where you have the woman, you have the man. And they start out distantly, and then for whatever reason, they meet, they come together, they start to develop a relationship, and then after a certain amount of time, there's the dating period. So we have the meeting period, we have the dating period. They come together closer when they decide to get engaged. They get even closer. And when I say closer, I mean as a functioning unit, physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, they become more attracted to each other, more connected. So at some point, they get married, takes place, and for a period of about 2 years or so, they go through this honeymoon phase, and then at some point, they start going like that again. She said, there's usually one thing that, more than anything else, initiates this separation. Not physical separation, but spiritual, emotional, social separation. What is that thing? Yeah, kids. So kids start popping in, and this separation happens, and they don't understand it. They don't understand what's going on. All they understand is that they're not as close, they're not as one as they used to be in this phase right here. It's not feeling like this anymore. And without knowing how to deal with this, without having tools to handle it, they just keep right on going. You know, something turns into divorce, turns into separation, turns into maybe in the same house, but that's all it is. You know, under the same roof, and that's the extent of that relationship. Do you know people like that? Yeah. Nobody intends at the beginning, nobody intends during this time for this to happen. Nobody does. I can't wait 3 years down the road and we're going to be hating life. That's never anyone's intent. But this happens, and what's the divorce rate now?
In the
United States?
49.
1 in 2.
Oh my gosh.
1 in 2 marriages end in divorce right now. It actually, the last piece of research I saw said, because in the 90s it was 1 in 3, about 2000 it was down to 1 in 2, and it's starting to turn just a little bit. But I read something not too long ago that said, I don't remember if it was a California poll or a national poll, that said, we as a culture don't value marriage nearly as much as we used to. It's not given the juice that we used to give it. But anyway, well, the common thing that takes place amongst people as they get older is they either do this or they do tend to come back together. And what do you think it is that starts reversing this? Kids are gone. Yeah, that's pretty much, you know, the thing that is the overriding thing.
Yeah, that makes me feel really good, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, we were here just ready for them to be gone, and then another one shot in there, and so we weren't expecting our number 4. So anyway, when I was in this class and I saw this, it seems to me that this is not the way I wanted it to be. I don't want, if I'm going to be with somebody, I want to be with them. I want to be with her. I want to enjoy the whole thing. I don't want to have the social, the emotional separation. And so I thought back here and I was clear over here when I was in that class. I wasn't connected with anyone at all. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I do not want that to happen. And so in all of my reading and studying, I came upon some interesting literature on relationships, because it seems to me we're all about relationships. Most of our lives, we have relationships, and having those relationships work, it seems to me to be one of the most valuable things we can have happen. You know, your family, your friends, if your relationships are going well, you're usually a lot happier. People who are depressed aren't hanging out with their friends having a great time. So I included in all of my reading back when I was working in the library and stuff, I found books on relationships. You know, and some were better than others, but there was one book that kind of rose to the top back then. And it was a book by a guy by the name of John Gray. Some of you have probably heard of this book. It was called, remember?
Mars or something.
Men are from Mars,
Women
Are from Venus. Okay. Have any of you read this? You've read it?
Yeah, 10 years ago.
It's been a while. Does anyone else? You've read parts?
Yeah, I don't remember much of it.
Okay. It's a really it's a really interesting idea that I had never thought of before. He kind of got the ball rolling, and I'll tell you where some of you will be more familiar with where the ball has ended up. But getting that ball rolling was the idea that men and women are different, and until you understand that difference and can live with that, the relationship won't work. So, do you remember what the differences were?
I remember one thing that was really, I mean, it stuck in my head all these years, that men retreat.
Mm-hmm.
and go
When
to
do they
the cave.
retreat?
During stressful times.
Mm-hmm. When there's a problem, men tend to retreat. They tend to, he said, yeah, go into their cave. In our days, it's the garage or the basement or somewhere.
Yeah.
They go. So that's one thing.
I read, like, you know, partway through the beginning, and one of the things I remember is that one thing about men is like, well, when women come to us about their problems, we think they want a solution. We think, you know, the men are like, oh, I can help you solve this, and that's not what they want. They just want to talk about it, and we think, I can solve it, and they get mad at us when, you know, we're trying to solve something they just want to talk about it.
Right. That's the essence of the book, is we men have a different idea about how to deal with the stressors, the problems, the issues than you women do. And we get frustrated when the opposite sex doesn't want to solve it how we think we should solve it. That's the problem, according to John Gray. So yeah, for example, when I go home and my wife has had a rough day and she starts unloading. Okay, just, you gotta hear, I talked to we've got this big tax problem that we're dealing with. And so she unloads with that, and our kids had these problems at school, and we've got a gym at the junior high that's way too small, we're trying to make a new one, and all these things that, and in my mind I'm going, okay, let's deal with that we'll call the tax man, and we'll deal with that, and we will connect with the people who are in charge of the superintendent, and I'll go talk to my son about the challenges he's having at his preschool. And I start saying how we'll solve it. She gets so ticked off. Really, she's like, we could just shut up and listen. That's all she wanted. And I learned a long time ago the very best words that I could possibly say when she is unloading is, mm-hmm. I'm not kidding in the least.
Does she watch these?
I don't know.
I got it on loud.
She may. She knows this. She knows that this is how we are.
The best thing a woman can say is just listen.
Yes.
Because I started saying that to my husband.
Yeah.
I just need you to listen.
Yeah. Because we don't know. Because a guy's idea is, okay, there's 7 things I got to take care of. Give me a list and I'll write it down and I'll get to each one. On the opposite side, when a guy has a problem, she thinks he wants to talk about it. Tell me more about your problem. I'm sure if we talk about it. And when my wife talks about things, then it's all over. She's fine. When I talk about things, it just makes things expand. It's worse. And so when the woman wants to talk about things and the guy is going, no, it's like a car's got a problem, I got to fix it. Talking about it isn't going to fix the car. Kind of idea. Does that make sense? And so Gray's whole idea, which I think is a good one, is if you understand where the other person is coming from, in other words, their nature, the guy is going back to caveman days, I guess, but the guy was the one who took care of things, and the woman was the one who took care of things, made sure things were running in the home, but it was more feelings oriented. And knowing that's really valuable was his premise, okay? So that's interesting. Then along came Gary Chapman. What was his? Has anyone not heard of that book, 5 Love Languages? Few of us? Okay. I don't know for sure, but my guess is he just took that. They were both marriage counselors. He took what Gray did and said, I can expand on that some. I'm pretty sure that there's more to it. And so he had the same idea. He starts out, is anyone reading that book in here? Oh, good. So I'll let you guys kind of fill me in. Andrew, have you read much of it?
I'm like the close one.
I'm done with it.
Okay, so describe, because I hate, this is just, it's so hard for me to say those words. Ugh, it just feels, I love tank. It's just a creepy thing to say. So, love tank. So, or love bucket. Can tell us about, Diane, Andrea, tell us about his idea of the love tank. What is that supposed to, what's going on with that? Do you remember?
Yeah, I have it right here.
You got it right in front of you.
Yeah. So your love tank starts like when you're a kid, and it's however you were emotionally, like how. So if your parents were way physical, then you're gonna be like if your parents had like physical touch or used words of affirmation, then that's how you're gonna be. And if you're, hold on, let me find it.
While she's looking, what can you add to that?
That's the way that you're going to receive love.
Yeah.
If that was how you were taking care of or loved. So it's your language, it's your dialect, it's your predominant language. How you go about receiving love, potentially how you go about giving love too, is through that language that
Okay,
began
but
earlier.
what does this have to do with anything? I think he starts off the book. I mean, this is early in the book where he talks about.
When your love tank is empty, it means you're depleted in that area. When your love tank is empty, you're more prone to frustrations, stresses in life. If your partner isn't filling up your love tank, then it's going to cause more stresses personally and elsewise. When your partner is aware of the way you receive love, the language, and does things, is committed to improving that relationship, your love tank gets full. Little thoughts, acts of kindness, words, touches, whichever language is your language, if they feed your love, it fills your tank, and then you're not in despair.
In deficit of
a deficit.
feeling love. Taylor,
Bliss.
go ahead.
And I guess to add that, with what Diane was saying, to be aware of each other's love languages, because our partners may be different than ours, which is most likely, or a different variation, and so we may not be used to that.
Now hold on for just a
Okay.
second, because these guys who have never opened the book are going, what the heck are you talking about? I don't. So I want to build some foundation first, so that we're all understanding when you guys are saying love language, touch, and all these things, that it makes perfect sense to the rest of us who haven't read the book. So the idea behind this love tank is that everyone has a certain amount of need for, that's one of our inherent needs, and I'm borrowing from some other people in this, but one of our inherent needs is to be loved. To love and to be loved. That is not a program, that is an inherent component of us as beings. It's not a program that we create, you know, like subconscious stuff. This is innately part of us, is the need to be loved. And the feeling that we are affirmed, that we're loved, that we're appreciated. It's part of us. Now the problem is when well, let me ask you this. When you're in this period here, what are some of the things that you do that demonstrate to your partner, and some of us I know haven't been here yet, some of us have been here more than once, doesn't matter. When you're in this phase right here, what are you doing? What are some things that are happening as a couple that weren't happening before?
You're spending time together, giving gifts, talking, doing activities. Just, you know, I'll go wash the car for you, that way you get homework done, doing service, stuff like that.
Okay.
You're not
Buddy?
living with the person, so you went from independent to very dependent on the other person. So you're spending all your time mainly with them and you're looking at them. So
Yeah.
you're learning all their habits that weren't shown.
That you're learning what?
You're learning all their habits and programs that weren't shown before
Oh.
because you weren't around enough.
Okay.
You weren't living with them.
True.
You're touching.
Yeah, you're trying to do everything possible to fill this up. I came so close to making little hearts. Oh. This was just so bad. You're doing everything within your power to let that person know, let your partner know that you really love him or her, and you do things to try to make deposits into that bucket, okay? And as a result of doing those things, you feel connected, you feel one, you feel together. Really simple. You know, sure, it's the kids, but I know plenty of couples who kept going that way, and it was because they just kept doing the same things. It just kept going. They felt like they were receiving the love that they inherently needed. Does that make sense? They felt like, yeah, this person cares about me. Now, Chapman says there are basically 5 different ways that people commonly show, or like to not show. There are 5 different ways that people tend to prefer being loved.
And see them as love.
Say that again?
And see them as love, because
Yes, right. That when somebody does something, somehow, and we'll explain what those are, they go, yes, that by doing that, I feel loved. He says, and he said there's basically 5, according to him. And so let's explore those really fast, really quickly. Just those of you, there's physical touch.
Words of affirmation.
Words of affirmation.
Quality time.
Access.
I should have an overhead in this. Quality time, acts of service, receiving gifts. Now, the idea here is, his premise was most everybody has one of those that is more a preference than the others. And the object is to find that out and let your partner know, so that your partner knows what's the best way to fill your love tank. Does that make sense? Does that make sense how I said that? For those of you who have not read the book, is that clear so far? So like, for example, and I'll just give the example of my own experience. I know for sure, well, I ask my wife frequently, we say, okay, which one of these is yours? But I know for sure, she'll say, well, it's all of them. Of course, she wants to. No. She has a hard time figuring it out, but I know for sure it's quality time. I absolutely know. It doesn't matter. Well, let's clarify what each of these mean. Okay? So when we say physical touch, what does that mean? Have you gotten to that chapter yet?
Well, it's like a pat on the back, or it's not necessarily like sexual. It's like a pat
But it could be.
Yeah.
But it also just could be, you know, good to see you.
Even just nearness sometimes.
Okay, so proximity physically with connection usually physically touching, okay? However that looks. And there's a million ways, okay? Words of affirmation, what does that mean? Somebody else?
I love you.
So you would, rather than touching her, you would, man, you look great today, you know? And that is for her, that's a deposit.
You're such a good mother, you're such a hard worker.
Yeah.
You're such a, yeah.
Words of affirmation where you say, you give that person positive, encouraging feedback, compliments, whatever that is. Okay? For some people, that's the best thing. That's what in their mind feels like, and we'll explore. I'll show you in a second how to find that out. It's really cool what yours is. The next one, quality time, this is just what?
Time spent engaging with each other, like intellectually or just.
Without your cell phone or your TV.
Huh?
Without your cell phone or your TV.
Yeah, they say that the TV, so, you know, we're watching TV together, isn't that quality time? But you're not really spending time together.
But it could be. I wouldn't rule that out.
If that's how that person
Yeah.
receives it.
Right.
But on the other side, one party can say, but we're spending time together, we're watching TV. But if the other party says, that's not quality time.
It's not
for me."
perceived as quality time.
Yeah, this is just me succumbing to where you're at
Right.
to try to get a little something out of
Quality
this.
time, yeah. So being together, not necessarily touching or not touching, that's not the deal, but just being with each other in a communicating kind of environment, that's what that is about, okay? Acts of service, on the other hand, what does that look like?
Like going to wash the car.
Yeah, when you have dishes that have to be done and he does them, if that is your preferred love language and he does it to you, that's a huge deposit. You're going, man, he does love me because he's washing dishes. You may not care about if you're making out, or you may not care if you're, you know, together, but he's doing that thing for you. Oh, okay, that's that person. And none of these, there's no superior or inferior to these. They're all just, this is different, how people are differently. Receiving gifts, what are some, I mean, that sounds obvious, but what might that include?
Like surprise flowers, just because.
Mm-hmm. There's a good example. What else? Love notes, email, texts, you know, even something that small. To all the way to, wow, new car.
I like it
A
when
wheat
I
grinder.
get gifts that like I actually wanted, because you know how sometimes men get women a gift and you're like, oh thanks, I'm never gonna use that.
Well, and it shows that they listened because you said, oh, I really like that. And then like 6 months later, when it is time for a gift or whatever, they remember that remembering. So I guess it even kind of goes into the others by remembering sometimes.
Give an example.
Like, if you remember, because you spent quality time and you said something, or you were shopping and you pointed out, oh, I really like that, or whatever, and then they remember, it's kind of like, I'd say it qualifies as the quality time and the act of service by listening and remembering, and then the gift. So sometimes I think through one...
Yeah, and I'll bet you many things that you do, yes, absolutely. The important thing, and this, I wish I'd have known this growing up. I mean, really, when I was little, I had one older brother, 2 younger brothers. There was not a girl for miles. And so when it came to dating, I had no idea. I wish I would have had an older sister who I could go, what do girls think about this? You know, do they like that? Do they like this thing? Nobody told me, and so I made a million mistakes. It was like a crash course, and it was always crashing.
Makes you feel any better. I have 4 sisters and 3 sister-in-laws. Still doesn't help.
Didn't help. I would have liked to have had that. Anyway, yeah, I think you're right. That there's many things that we do could qualify for several of these.
How does a person decide which one is the most important to them? Is it how they were shown from their parents? Is it a personal thing? Does it say in the book?
Let's find out.
Okay.
This is what we're going to do next. Good segue. So, does this make sense for everyone? Are there any questions about this? So, and I think in his book, if I remember right, I've read so many on this, but I think he said most people have one, but several slightly lesser. My wife's sure she has all 5, but he said there's usually one preferred, and then maybe 1 or 2 that aren't quite as, you know, not quite as big of hearts, but still have the effect of, wow, he loves me for that, or she loves me for that, for what he just did, or what we're doing, okay? So, does that make sense for everyone? Any questions? So it seems to me when I was learning this, I mean, this was just such a brilliant idea. If I can know what is the way that she likes the most, I've solved the problem. I've solved every problem, not every problem, but just about every problem, if I know that the most important thing for me is to have her be this full as far as our relationship, because when she's full, everything's great, right? That's the idea. If this is empty, ain't nothing good. If this is full, she's good, and that means our relationship is likely to be working. And so if I can know what that is, if there's a choice, and I'm always choosing the wrong one, that was one of the things that they kept saying in the book, is the problems with marriage is the guy would, man, I'm giving you gifts, I'm giving you all kinds of stuff, and it's, oh, man, I'm just doing everything to give you all these things, thinking that's what's going to fill up his tank, and she's going, but we never spend time together. Or vice versa, you're always around, but you never give me stuff. This is what I want.
There was one that the guy, she wanted him to paint the room, and she was like nagging at him, and he decided to wash the car every time she would nag him to go do it, and when she stopped nagging him, he went and painted the room. So, and it was like, because he always talked about, oh, don't you want like a clean car? And so that would be an act of service, but she wanted the room painted more than she wanted the car cleaned.
Yeah. See, really, I mean, this is one of those, they always say, you know, what's the most important thing in a relationship, you know, and they say love, trust, communication. If communication is not happening and you're not giving that person the feedback saying, this is what I really like, you've missed out on the way to make this stay here. That's what I'm thinking.
I was going to say too, I would never get so focused on doing the one, because I think at some point in the relationship you need a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and that's why this works. That's why we're so happy here, because we're doing all five,
Because
usually.
I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and I have one brother, and he's under me, so he has 6 sisters. And believe me, he's been trained. But it took a lot, because he would like more of the receiving gifts. He would buy flowers. He's really good at that. But as far as like talking on the phone or calling them, he'd rather just text. And we had to say no. Like at some point, you know, maybe once a week, start slow or whatever, but call and actually talk to him on the phone. They want to hear your voice. They want to, you know, girls want to talk things out instead. So you just have to kind of, it's a learning curve for everybody, male and female.
And what a brilliant curve to be on.
Yeah.
I mean, just to know that, man, I can improve things? Wow. So how do you find out? Well, there's 2 or 3 ways. Let me give you, we're going to use this as kind of a worksheet, but it has the front of this is kind of the definitions for these, but we're going to use the back side of this to do some self-discovery. Feeling better? Yeah? Good. Okay. So what this has done is just, it's broken down each of these so you can kind of identify what that means for each of those love languages. So there are a few ways that you can quickly find out which of these is your preferred way. And I'd like to try this for a minute. The first way that you can find out So I want you to do this, and you can either close your eyes or not, but I want you to just sit and kind of think for a second. Stay focused on this. I'd like you to not be doing anything else. But I would like you to think back to a time in your life, and it may be with somebody else, but it may or may not be involving this component here of honeymoon marriage stuff, but maybe it's with your parents, maybe it was a sibling, maybe it was a boyfriend or girlfriend, doesn't matter. But I want you to think back to a time in your life, and if you can, pinpoint an event where you felt absolutely loved. Just kind of go there for a second and put that on your mental screen for a second, and then I'll ask you a question. So just kind of find one. And if for some of us it's been a while, then just keep looking. Try to find that, that time period or that moment where you felt like you were absolutely full. Some of us, it's probably been recently, I'm guessing. Now, here's the question for you. Does everyone have one? No one's going to say yes or no. Here's the question for you. What was going on? What was the predominant thing that was happening for you at that moment or in that time period? Was it you were engaged physically? Were you really, was it just you were connecting with each other by that person telling you, what a great, beautiful, wonderful, was it just because you were together? Was it because of something you were receiving or be something that the person was doing? What was the predominant one? Okay, so on the back side of this page, really quickly, on the back side of this page, I want you to just very briefly write, so that you can remember, just write down whatever that event was, say honeymoon or whatever. I'm just using Maggie as an example because it was so recent. And then indicate, write down on there, which of these was the likely one. Which was more the component than any of the other four. Does that make sense? Which of those was more happening than any of the other four? Okay, now the next thing I want you to do is ask yourself, which of these 5 ways do you tend to do with others around you? Which of these 5 ways tends to be your way that you commonly feel like that's how I should express love to whomever? Now, I'm sure you do it all 5 ways. But which is the one that you find yourself doing the most? Okay? So that's the second way you can find out. The third one, the third way that you can find out is you can ask yourself, what do I complain about the most with my partner, with people around me, when I say, we don't blah anymore? What is the blah that you would put in there?
I never thought about it that way, but that's so indicative.
Yeah, it is.
What do you want from me?
And then the last one is ask yourself, what do I request the most often from the other person? What kind of, when I say, let's blah, that you think is going to be filling your love tank, what is that? So there's 4 ways that you can immediately tell Or at least get an idea of which one of those is most preferred for you. Does that make sense for everybody? So here's what I would like you to do. Between now and Friday, I want you to, and I'm actually not going to have you hand this in, and so I know some of you will just go, okay, and I'm not going to do anything with it. But if this matters to you, and I don't know anyone who relationships don't matter for, I'd like you to just kind of be introspective for a little bit and ask yourself, what's the answers to these 4 questions? You know, when I've felt the most loved, what was the experience, what was going on? What do I request the most? What do I complain about the most? What do I tend to do for others the most? And then, what's the obvious next thing to do?
Communicate that with the person.
Yes. Tell that other person, you know what? I just found out that this is how I want you to love me, more than anything. You'll be amazed how nice that makes things. Whew. Takes the pressure off.
Okay, really quickly, like when I first read this book, like it was within a couple of years after getting married, and so I was trying to figure it out, and one way I figured it out was because I was like, would try him, and I'm like, oh, you know, I really want you to help me around the house or something, and then he would do it, and I'm like, well, you didn't load the dishwasher right, you know, or like, that's way, I know I'm a horrible wife, or like, I'm like, well, why don't you like give me gifts or something? So then it was Valentine's Day, and he gave me a George Foreman grill, and I had like major jaw surgery the week before. And
George Foreman grill.
Oh yeah, let's go cook a steak. And I couldn't even open my mouth, you know, so I'm like, I kind of had to do it that way because I couldn't figure it out, but by narrowing it down, because I'm like, oh, I guess I really don't want you to help me out because, or maybe I don't want gifts because you know.
There's some honing going on. You've got to do a little honing. On Friday, we're going to, Friday and Monday, we're going to learn the master's, or no, today's Friday, isn't it? On Monday, we're going to learn the master skill in a way that most of us have never heard of before, that takes this to a whole new level, and it's just so cool. So, we'll see you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend finding out about who you are.